How he does it and how he manages to get such a beautiful finish on a lot of his pieces. So with that, Kade, I'll leave it up to you.
Okay.
Alrighty. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm gonna.
Mic's on.
It's on. It's not up. Sorry.
Here.
Yeah.
All right. Today I'm going to talk about finishing. I'll touch briefly on finishes, and then I'll talk more specifically about my finishing technique. There are several finishes out there on the market. By far, durability, a bar top finish or an epoxy finish would be your most durable. It'd be dent resistant, waterproof. When doing epoxy finishing, it's a bit of a learning curve because it's pretty sticky. It's not like a free-flowing oil or a water-based. So I haven't done too much of the epoxy finishing yet, but by far it is the most durable. There are other finishes on the market, such as top coat finishes that just top coat the wood, such as some water-based finishes, some lacquers, and polys and varathanes. I find they're more of a top coat finish. They don't penetrate into the wood as much as, say, an oil would. You can dilute lacquers and polyurethanes and varathanes to get a better penetration into the wood, which is a great idea, because with the top coat finishes, if you scratch the surface, the underlying layer is bare wood. It is no longer waterproof or water resistant. The wood underneath that top coat finish will now absorb anything you throw in that bowl. My finishing technique is tung oil. For the most part, I use oil finishes. I've used tung oil, teak oil, antique oil, Danish oil, walnut oil. All oil finishes act the same and similar. Oil finishes, I still dilute through the first few coats. My first few coats are always diluted 50% to get maximum penetration into the wood, and then I build up a finish to the sheen I like. I like oils because you really can, well, I don't usually go for a satin or a semi-gloss. I like a high shine or a high glass finish. I find it's really durable. People who like shiny, if it's smooth and it's shiny, it sells itself. And it's also durable. If it was scratched, the underlayers wouldn't absorb any finishing. My finishing technique is transferable to apply other finishes of your desire. I'm not saying one finish is better than the other. There are other finishes out there like a beeswax finish or a beeswax mineral oil finish. They're a good finish. They're a quick, easy finish. You can coat it, buff it all in one day. But I find over time with vinaigrettes and oils and acidity and the oils from our hands, all the waxes will wear off the bowl and jeopardize the integrity of that bowl, because eventually over time it will dry out. When you use a beeswax mineral oil finish, the consumer has to recoat the cutting board or the bowl ever so often. Maybe monthly, maybe every 2 months, depending how often they use that bowl. I find consumers don't often remember to maintain and condition their bowl. They almost forget, which again jeopardizes the integrity of the bowl. It will eventually shift, move, dry out, and crack if they don't maintain a beeswax finish. But it is a quick, easy finish. If it's not going to be, if it's just a display bowl, decorative, that's a great finish. It's done in an hour and it looks great, but I wouldn't use it for like soups. salads, chips, dips, goblets that might hold wine, stuff like that. When I am doing now I will talk more specifically about my finish. My finish isn't necessarily the best finish, it's just the finish that I have sort of perfected for myself. It's the finish I like to use. So if you have one that works for you, use that. If you want to try another one that might be more durable, try it out, go for it. Whenever I'm doing a bowl, I always sand my bowls on the lathe. If it's a uniform bowl, perfectly circular, no rough edges, not live edges, I would sand this on the lathe. When you're sanding on the lathe, slower is better. Some people think faster is better because it looks like more material is being removed, because the centrifugal force is throwing that dust everywhere throughout the air. Actually, it is actually filling up those grain lines in the wood, and it's actually acting against you, and you take off less wood. When you sand at a slower speed, you actually remove more material. So when I'm sanding, I sand anywhere between 300 and 500 RPMs. If it's a uniform bowl like this, I would sand this spinning on the lathe by hand. I would go through the grits. If it's really bad, say 80, start at 80, start at 100. Then I would go 150, 180, 240. When I first started turning, I used to sand all the way through the grits up to 4, 5, 6, 7, 800. I found over trying different finishes and coming up with a finish that was my go-to finish, I found that the finish is going to be smoother than I can sand past 240. The sheen and the shine and the glare is also going to be smoother when I build up my finish. It's going to be like glass. So really I thought to myself, sanding past 240 for me is almost a waste of a time, because I'll sand right up to 240. My final sanding will be with the grain, because when you're doing centrifugal force sanding, sometimes you'll get circular rings from the rotation of the lathe in the wood. Final sanding, I would go with the grain. Any scratches that are in the wood are hidden in the wood going with the grain. If you have a scratch going across grain, you'll see it like a sore thumb. But if you have a scratch going with the grain, it's hidden in the grain. If it is, that's if I do a uniform bowl or a plate or a platter. A lot of my stuff I do is live edge or irregular edge. So I would never have this spinning on the lathe as I'm sanding, because I would have wood, air, wood, air, wood, air as it's coming around. As I'm sanding, this wood would throw my hand into the air pocket, wood's coming around, and it would mincemeat your knuckles. I did that once. I won't do it again. So now I have the lathe hold my piece in place, and I sand with a drill. Again, I have it stationary, locked in place, and I sand the bowl with the drill. Going through the grits, if it's really bad, start at 80. Not so bad, start at 120. And then I will go through the grits, 120, 180, 240. Or 100, 150, 240. My first coat on the lathe is always linseed oil. Double boiled linseed oil. Or boiled linseed oil. Boiled linseed oil is not actually boiled, they just add levelers and hardeners to the mixture, which allow it to dry quicker. Pure linseed oil can take weeks to dry. There's also two types of tongue oil on the market. There's polymerized and non-polymerized. Non-polymerized pure tongue oil is totally food safe, but it can take months, if not 6 months, to dry, depending on our humidity, our heat, our seasons. So I always choose a polymerized tongue oil. It will dry anywhere between 4 to 6 hours in our climate, depending on our season. So therefore you can do 3 coats a day, 1 in the morning, lunch, and 1 before bed. Yep.
For one thing you mentioned just prior to this was the cure is food safe. What about the polymerized one?
Polymerized is food safe as well. Any finish on the market nowadays in the Canadian market, once cured past that incubation period, they're all food safe. Just in case a kid or someone chews on your furniture, it has to be safe. But in liquid form, where it says it's poisonous, flammable, toxic, it's not, I wouldn't drink it. It's not food safe in liquid form. But once it is fully cured past the incubation period of say 20 to 30 days, the golden rule is if you can no longer smell the finish or the VOCs or the levelers and hardeners in the finish, it's totally food safe and non-toxic. All the levelers and hardeners have evaporated into our climate. Some people have sent me emails asking me that because Lee Valley has said that boiled linseed oil has heavy metals in it and it's not food safe, but it does have metals in it, and the levelers and hardeners have the metals in it, but they evaporate, leaving behind the linseed oil, which is food safe, or which I'm told by the Canadian CSA whatever laws we have here. Okay, that's a bit about finishing. When I'm doing irregular edges, I go through the discs. This is a 3-inch disc. I work my way up to 240. On smaller bowls, I use a 2-inch disc. So when you're using your 3-inch disc, you always only ever use maybe the 1/2 inch or maybe the inch on the outside. Save those old discs, cut them out. Now you can reuse them on your 2-inch pad. Saving paper, saving money. That's sanding. Once I'm done sanding on the lathe, my first coat is boiled linseed oil. Now that will go into my drying room. I always put a oil or a sealant on the wood straight off the lathe, because even if the wood is kiln dried, it's dry on the outside areas, but as we know, wood is constantly absorbing and releasing moisture. So once you remove that outer layer of wood and then you remove that inner layer of wood, you have now exposed the moisture that was trapped in that wood to our climate. So it can shift, move, and still crack on you. So straight from the lathe, once I'm done sanding, I throw an oil on it. My go-to at the time, or right now continually, is linseed oil. You could throw a Danish oil, a walnut oil, tung oil, just any sort of oil into the wood. It seals the wood, penetrates the wood, it displaces the water, allowing it to dry evenly and less likely to crack on you. Once I have done that, the rough turn bowls go into my reptile room for drying. That is heat and humidity controlled. So in the summer, it will be anywhere between 30 degrees and 20% humidity. In the winter, it is anywhere from 15 to 20 degrees and 5% humidity. So I throw my bowls in there, I test them. Once they're down to 10%, I throw them on the lathe, sand them again, and then I apply my finish. Actually, no. These would be all rough turned. Rough turned, throw the linseed oil on them, throw them in my drying room. Once they're dry, I throw them back on the lathe, I sand through the grits, I apply linseed oil, I allow that linseed oil to dry for 3 to 4 days. Once I'm at that point, now I'm into my tung oil finishing. At any given time, when building up a coat of tung oil to a high gloss shine, depending on the wood of course and the density of the wood, to get a shine like this in butternut, you're looking at probably 14, 16 coats of tung oil built up to get it a shine.